The Square Ball Podcast.
Hello, welcome to the show. Dan here from The Square Ball, Michael Normanton from The Square Ball, Phil Hay from The Athletic for the end of the week show. We'll get an update in just a minute. A reminder that the show is brought to you by Levi Solicitors. Just when we unleashed the Wills probate conveyancing on you last week, Phil, the messaging has changed.
Do they still do them?
They do those. They are very keen to stress that they still do the big three.
Still my favourites. But
do they do managers?
As the cool kids call it. We'll get to that in a minute, as the cool kids call it. Wills probate conveyancing. Asking us just to let you know about the fact they do personal injury and they do medical negligence. Pretty self-explanatory, really. You know, you trust your doctors, your dentists, and your other medical professionals to do stuff right, don't you? Because I mean, you were saying over on the weekly show. If you've not seen the weekly show, by the way, have a look at that. Michael explains how he had a fall this week.
I was mocked for having a fall, I think it's fair to say.
Was it a proper fall?
I've got a scab on my knee.
Yeah. It's that.
What's that in personal injury circles? Fiver?
It was very much my own fault, so nothing.
Sometimes that doesn't matter. Yeah.
But I was saying if you fell over and you grazed your knee, is that right?
Yeah.
Bless you. Have you cleaned it up and stuff?
I did. I got a first aid kit in the car and I gave it a little antiseptic wipe. Once I'd run back and had a little cry at the shame.
Such a grown up. But imagine if you went to the doctor with that and they hacked your arm off. You'd be disappointed, wouldn't you?
I would actually, yeah. That would have made it worse.
I think that would constitute medical negligence. You do expect advice and actions to be accurate and generally improve your condition. That's what you're after, innit? Under most circumstances. And obviously, in most cases, they are. If they're not, get in touch with Levi's. 10% off your legal fees. levisolicitors.co.uk/the square ball. Any further action on the knee, or are you just contemplating your next move?
I think it's ended my professional career as a footballer.
Well, you're off to Sports Day later, so presumably the dad's race is out.
Yeah, no, I was already out from that.
That's funny. That's the first thing I said when I found out.
Already ruled out by a back injury.
Crying about
That's
that.
a shame, isn't it? Yeah.
That back. Enough on this. Let's move on to
no professionals. They said when I turned up. We can see you're in unbelievable shape.
Yeah.
Oh dear me. Let's talk about Leeds United. And it's midday, bang on midday on Thursday as we say these words, and we still don't have a manager. Taking the time, aren't they, Phil?
They are. I didn't commit to that on Monday when you said, when we get together on Thursday, will they definitely have a manager? And I said, well, should have kind of moved forward by then.
They might have one, Phil, but they might just not be telling anybody.
No, I don't think they've made a decision yet, although that's not to say that they're not much closer than they were at the start of the week. There were certainly interviews done yesterday, which was Wednesday, conversations going on. You're right that it's taken some time. I think, again, just to be totally fair in this, they obviously lost 2 weeks of the summer to trying to negotiate with Radrizzani to get the takeover deal in place and ready for EFL approval, which was done a fortnight ago now. But it has been, to coin a phrase, process-focused, process-driven. I don't know what I was going to say the cool kids, but the cool members of HR departments say these days. But it hasn't been a case of...
What's that? Process focused.
Yeah, process driven.
I think when you said those words, you just made me sort of zone out.
It sounds slow.
Yeah, we used to have the occasional sort of briefings at the Yorkshire Evening Post, where people would talk to you about that sort of stuff, and we used to sit up the back of the room and glaze over and gaze out the window.
Giggling like naughty school kids.
To put it in plain English, it's not been a case of connections, this one. It's not been a case of, as for example, Angus Kinnear being able to phone up Sam Allardyce and say, we want to change for the last 4 games of the season. I know you, you know me. Will you do it? Yes, I will. It hasn't gone down those lines. It has been preliminary contact, Zoom chats, and now this week, face-to-face interviews down in London, in which Paraag is involved. He's come over from America for this. He will be very soon Leeds United's new chairman as part of this 49ers Enterprises takeover. It has not been a kind of click your fingers, make your decision, take whoever you can get. But without a doubt, it's taken time, and we are almost into the last week of June.
Could he maybe have been here a bit sooner, and they could have got this process accelerated? Is that a fair criticism?
It's certainly a fair question. Yes, he could have been. Yes, they could have done. But this has been the way they've decided to do it. I have to say, they don't seem stressed about it. I don't get the sense of any tension or anxiety. They seem quite happy with the way it's going and the speed it's moving at. But as with just about everything in football, the way in which this is judged and the way in which it looks with hindsight will depend on how the summer goes and the rest of the summer goes, how the season goes. If it's a good season, you'll look back at this and say, they got it right, took the time, made the right decision. If it's not a great season, you might look back at this summer and say the timing of everything was not great.
So do you think that's the thing that any Leeds fan who is feeling a little bit anxious about the time that this is taking, that's the thing to remember, is that they have to get this right rather than get it done quickly?
Well, they do have to get it right, definitely, which probably means not just lumping on the first thing you can and taking some time to go through formal interviews and presentations, which it tends to be the way things are done these days if you don't have an out-and-out candidate who you specifically want to jump on. You know, I mean, even with Bielsa, there were presentations done and, you know, long explanations of what he would do with the squad, although the circumstances there were different because Leeds were very much on the flights to Argentina saying to themselves, really, really hope this guy will indulge us and have a go at this, you know, we'll take the job on. Whereas in a lot of interview processes, you're open-minded, and that's how it's been with this one. You've seen the names who've been linked, Farke, and I was getting told off actually for Farke's surname. Shall we settle on Farke? Is Farke the right pronunciation?
Is it?
I think. I don't know. I kept saying Farke. Yeah.
I'm a Farke man myself.
I'm a Farke man, yeah. Like, that rhymes with Scott Parker.
Yeah, I'll phone somebody in Germany later. We'll find out. Otherwise, this will be a phone contention all the way through.
The level of... In fact, somebody did pull us up on this last week because all three of us, they were saying, said it slightly differently.
Right.
So this is the sort of level of diligence and prep that goes into these shows.
Yes.
Daniel Farke. Go follow hello on it.
Well, that's it. It's Max Verber all over again. But yeah, so you in this process has been presentations, been face-to-face interviews now. It's not a case of this is who we want, so we're just going to go and make him an offer and try and get it done. So yes, it could have been done more quickly. I don't think it could have been done vastly more quickly because of the time it took to nail down a deal with Radrizzani. But at the same time, we're now virtually a week away from the start of pre-season training, the initial group who'll come back, not including the internationals. So yeah, but I sort of feel like it's going to be like this all summer. Everything is going to be against the clock because of the circumstances.
Do you get a sense that they know who they want, but it's a case of going through a process and seeing who's available and wage demands and all that sort of stuff? Or is it a case that they're still deciding? Because if they're still deciding at this point, I don't know, it feels late.
I think they know what they want, if that makes sense, as opposed to specifically who they want. And when I say specifically who they want, I don't mean they don't have any idea of what would be a short list or who might fit nicely. I just think that in a list of Farke, Parker, Patrick, that doesn't help, does it? No, rule him out immediately. Patrick Vieira, who's also in contention for this, we can chat a little bit more about him because it's not the first time he's been linked with the job. I genuinely get the feeling that with most, if not all of them, they're looking at them and thinking they could all work for us. But the reason that you sit them down and speak to them and go through interviews, presentation processes is to decide who actually stands out from the group. Are
we down to a two then of Vieira and Farke?
Well, certainly Parker has been interviewed. One of the interesting things is that with Carlos Corberan, who's been spoken about a lot within Elland Road and was one of the people under discussion when they were first thinking about how to replace Sam Allardyce, Leeds haven't approached West Brom as of last time of asking to discuss his release clause or to ask permission to interview him, which they would certainly need to do. And I know a lot of this stuff can from time to time go on behind closed doors, and it wouldn't be the first time that a coach has spoken to a club without his current employers knowing. But that would have to happen, and the fact that it hasn't suggests that they're kind of looking elsewhere, although given that Corberan is so well liked at Leeds, I would never kind of rule him out completely. But I think between Farke and Vieira, they'll see two very strong candidates there. Vieira, we wrote about this back in February after Jesse Marsh left, and actually it was after the piece was published after Vieira himself was sacked by Palace. When Marsh went from Leeds, when Leeds dismissed him, Vieira was one of the people who kind of showed a tentative interest in the job, which was quite intriguing because he was at the time employed by Crystal Palace, and although there was a feeling at Palace that it wasn't quite working and it was almost running its course, that relationship, Vieira and Palace, they hadn't reached the point either where they were prepared to sack him or ready to sack him, and he equally wasn't kind of halfway out the door himself. But he clearly had it in his head that he might be further down the line, and he looked at the Leeds job and was, I think, quite tempted by what was there, and the fact that he's in the mix again suggests to you that it is one that he would like to have a crack at, or one that he would like to get involved in if Leeds were willing to take him on. I still sort of think, pound for pound, looking at looking at Farke's record, that the 2 promotions with Norwich as title winners on both occasions have to give him a bit of an edge.
Do you think Vieira's even in this discussion if he hasn't got 400 games for Arsenal under his belt? In terms of his record, like, because a lot of managers come and go in the Premier League and they'll have a season where things go well, then they get sacked, and then they disappear into nowhere.
It's been a little like that for Vieira in Europe, obviously at Nantes and then at Palace as well. He does have the prior experience of coaching in New York, and I suppose one of the things that might work in his favour is that he does have a prior and very good relationship with Jack Harrison, who, well, I think we all expect Harrison to go, is one of the players who the 49ers and Leeds would very, very much like to keep if there was any way of making that happen. I suspect the interest in Harrison, of which there is plenty, will be too intense and too overwhelming for that. But I think you're right. I mean, most managers end up with some form of failure on the record. So, Farke's come into this process on the back of being sacked by Borussia Mönchengladbach. But I don't think you can deny that having 2 championship titles on your record as a manager, as a head coach, is a pretty big feather in your cap and is a very, very big selling point when it comes to trying to present yourself to a club who've just been relegated and don't want to stick around in the Championship for long.
Do you think, Phil, that maybe they have half an eye on the next step and they are looking at what might happen in the Premier League? And do you think that is a mistake?
Oh, good double question and a very good one. Yes, I think they do, in as much as this appointment feels like it will be shaped for the season ahead. Like there is a big emphasis, understandably, being placed on the need to get promoted and the need to get promoted quickly and ideally within 12 months. So right from the start, the people who Angus Kinnear was engaging initially and the people we know about that they're speaking to this week, there does feel like, that is where the attention lies on who would be a good solution for a season in which we need to go up. Beyond that, I guess it depends on the performance of whoever comes in. But I think they may well have in mind options, ideas, head coaches who potentially would be better suited to the Premier League, who they might feel that they will have to engage further down the line and in order to make sure that they're suited for the Premier League, not just the Championship. But it doesn't feel, unless something comes out of the blue, it doesn't feel like they're going to go for something this time round that looks like a vastly long-term project. I mean, take Maresca at Leicester, for example, which I think I've said before, I think is a pretty interesting appointment, that one. I spoke to Robert Snodgrass earlier this week, who played or was coached by Maresca at West Ham. And, usual caveat from him of saying sometimes these things just don't work, but he thinks that's a really good appointment. He thinks they've landed a really good one in Maresca. And I think, given Maresca's track record, the fact he's coached with Guardiola, that he is so highly regarded, you could certainly see a scenario in which he gets Leicester promoted and is their manager, their head coach for an extended period of time. Whereas with others who are in the mix at Leeds at the moment, Parker being a very good example, but the same true of Farke as well at Norwich, they found it harder to make it stick in the Premier League. And I think to an extent, certainly at Norwich, you could say that was probably down to budget. But at the same time, I think if 49ers Enterprises have it in their minds that Leeds are going to re-establish themselves as a Premier League club and then ideally establish themselves as a top 10 club, perhaps whatever happens this summer will, with hindsight, look fairly short-term as we get further down the line.
Because I was wondering, that question came from a place of wondering if they have one eye on Vieira, thinking he might be better in the Premier League than Farke, but you've got to get there first, haven't you? And Farke seems like the more obvious choice to get us back there based on having done it twice.
I don't feel like this is a summer in which they're going to sit and spend a lot of time saying who's going to be better when we get promoted. I think the discussion will be, and the discussion has been, who is going to get us out of this league. They wouldn't want to do it in a way where it had absolutely no scope of sustaining itself once they get promoted. I mean, ideally, if they do go up in 1 year, next summer it would be nice to have a fairly stable period where you could actually stick with the coach that you had and build in those circumstances. But I think if there's one lesson Leeds have probably learned from the last 3 years, is that it's very easy to get ahead of yourself and it's very easy to think about tomorrow when you're not really managing properly today. So, yeah, I think all roads will lead to making sure that this season goes well.
Well, if that's the case, then if they're not spending time on worrying too much about the future and want to get this season done and dusted, surely it's Farke.
Well, I kind of feel like that Farke ticks a lot of the right boxes, especially when it comes to parodies and square ball impressions. But I guess if you're keeping your options relatively open in saying that you don't want to make a decision without giving it due thought, perhaps you do give other people the chance to have their say, to sit in front of you, to speak to you, to map out what they would do. And it's not to say that Vieira wouldn't be a good coach in the Championship. It might be that he'd be a success down there. I think he certainly has the ego and the character to manage a club like Leeds. But in terms of basic track record for the Championship, it seems to me that Farke is kind of out there ahead of most of the people who've been mentioned.
I'm interested to know how much the interview process counts really for a manager, because it's particularly if you're a new manager and your first job, I guess you've got to kind of talk your way into it. But for someone who's got a track record, it feels like that is surely the 90% of the interview is there that you can say, well, look, I've done this, and rather than if you go in and say, well, this didn't go well. It's not like a normal job interview where people go in and lie about what they've done. Everyone can see everyone can see exactly what your record is.
Yeah, I was going to say every candidate's a known quantity, aren't
exactly.
they?
You can go in. You can go in and I suppose make some excuses for like, oh, that fell apart because I wasn't backed here and this.
Isn't that what you press them on? You know, why did this not quite work out? Why did that go wrong? How did you work with your sporting director, for example, director of football? You know, how did you manage that relationship? I think as well, Bielsa was very good at this. Clubs tend to like to see that a head coach coming in has really good knowledge of what he's inheriting, so knows a lot about the squad that's already at Leeds. And okay, I kind of odd some of this one because a lot of what's at Leeds will depart. So it's not as if you're going in and inheriting a team that is going to be there for you to use. Even some of the players who train under whoever the head coach is initially will be gone by the end of the window or by the time the season starts. But that's. You know, I remember somebody saying that when Leeds approached Ranieri in the summer when Bielsa was appointed, and I have no idea if Ranieri was ever realistic. It certainly got nowhere, and he didn't show much interest in the job. But he didn't seem to be able to name any of the players in Leeds' squad or to have any knowledge of them, whereas Bielsa knew absolutely everything because Bielsa had done what he does and had dug through the entire framework of the club, you know, to work out what was there. So you do want to see a bit of that. You want to see a bit of that professionalism. They want to know things like, what are you going to do in pre-season? You know, how will you approach it? What do you think about recruitment? You know, what do you need to add to this team? What do you want in the squad?
Easy recruitment. Buy some players pre-season, do some running, and do some passing after you've done your running.
They could have employed you for what?
It's because I've been spending time
a year.
Time in Normanton.
Yeah. The professional here. Yeah, yeah. But that's the sort of stuff that you can drop on the toes and say, you know, what do you think needs done with this squad? What will you look to sign? What will you want? Is the question about
the squad not slightly different though, Phil? Because we're getting rid of most of it.
Well, that's why I was saying it isn't actually the usual exact science for Leeds this summer, because yes, a lot of them are going. But then again, you know, questions about who would you like to retain? Who specifically do you want to keep? Who do you want to go? Does that marry up with how we're thinking? Can that actually be done? You know, is it realistic? The fact that these guys are here for an interview anyway kind of tells you that they want the job and would almost certainly take it. So in a lot of ways, it feels as if the cards are mostly held by Leeds. But you're sort of right. By the time you get to the interview process, clubs probably have in their heads a fair idea of who it is that they want, you know, who they expect to be the outstanding candidate. But quite often it doesn't work out exactly as they expect.
What do you think of the sort of general overall silence that's coming out of the club so far? Are they right to keep the powder dry until they've got something to talk about? Because there's always in these circumstances, every summer when it's a bit quiet for a week or two, and particularly when you're up against the clock like this, admittedly adds fuel to that particular fire. Everyone's saying they need to say something. They need to say something. They need to do something. But there's nothing.
I think do something is more important than say something.
And I guess the saying something comes with the doing something, doesn't it? It's hand in hand.
It does, and it tends to be best that way. It's not helped by the fact that 49ers Enterprises don't actually own the club at the moment. They will do before long. I don't think it's that unlikely that we might get approval from the EFL or we might get a formal completion of this at some point in the next week. It's certainly been getting there, and there don't seem to be any obstacles. Once it is complete and once Radrizzani is gone and they are officially 100% owner of the club, then the freedom to speak on this and that becomes easier, becomes greater, and you can certainly say more. If they were speaking at the moment, it'd be highly unlikely that they would outline the exactly what they're doing with head coaches, exactly how it's going. So all you would get is, look, we're working towards completing this and we hope to make an appointment very soon. So yes, you get some words, but I don't think it would make you feel any better.
Just on the other name that came into the mix this week, seems to have drifted out again in the odds, but Raul, where did that come from?
Pass. He has been linked
Was it not somebody playing mischief?
I've no idea.
I think it might have been somebody playing mischief who started the rumour, a little bit like we did with the Danny Welbeck thing.
Ah, okay.
Started a rumour, maybe chucked 20 quid on it, and then the market starts moving, odds start dropping, and it snowballs from there, doesn't it? So, yeah.
I mean, I still view him as a handball cheat. Because I've got a long memory, but
well, I was going to say if Gordon Watson was in the frame for anything at Leeds United, I would still not allow him through the door for that dive in 1991, 2. I've forgotten exactly when it was.
Raul was linked at some point. I think a bit more strongly. It might have been when Marsh left. I forget now exactly.
I think it
but
was.
He hasn't been mentioned in dispatches really.
No, and it's kind of you see the Spanish link and Orta and that there, don't you? And it doesn't feel like a natural fit or something that would happen under these circumstances. All right then, so crystal ball time.
Oh no.
Not crystal ball time. Time to look ahead. When the 49ers do break their silence, assuming all this goes through smoothly, what do they need to say, do you think, as an opening gambit when it comes to dealing with a deeply, deeply scarred fan base?
Yes. You can probably separate out the head coach aspect of it from everything else. The head coach, they'll need to, and I would imagine want to explain, why they've gone for that choice, what it's going to mean, what it is about them in particular that meant they were right for the job. You tell me if I'm wrong, but I think people, when it comes to the bigger picture at Leeds, I think people will want to hear from Marathi in particular, really, because he's been the face of the 49ers. 49ers enterprises right from the start, and will become the.
Should we just settle on calling them 49ers? Because just to save on some syllables.
49ers, 49ers, yeah. Let's do it. I think people will want to hear some reflection from him on what's gone wrong over the past 2 years, why it's gone wrong, to an extent what part the 49ers played in that, given that they were a large minority shareholder in the boardroom, what's been learned from it, and from here forward, what is going to be different? What are going to be the contrasts with the ownership model that as was under Radrizzani?
And I guess they don't have to worry about upsetting Radrizzani going forward when they're 100% owners. Because
not
you
at all.
wonder, because my natural conclusion is, from what you said there, how will they blame Radrizzani without blaming him? But I guess it doesn't really matter anymore, does it, when he's gone?
No, it doesn't. I mean, they don't. The 49ers don't strike me as the sort who will throw grenades all over the place. It's never been like that. And actually, in most of the media that Marathi has done about Leeds up to this point, he's always been very guarded in giving huge amounts of detail or talking out of turn. And
it's all very vanilla, isn't it?
Well, as best I can tell, he doesn't have a Twitter account. He's got a very small Instagram account, which is private. A different personality to Radrizzani, and I think because of that, the projections from the club will be different too. But yeah, I mean, if questions are asked, as they will be, about what's gone on over the last 2 years, clearly somebody has to take responsibility for it. The blame lies somewhere. I think they can probably credibly say, look, we didn't have majority control, so therefore the ultimate power was not ours, but it certainly is now. And I think it probably would reassure people to know, or to hear him say, that they do actually understand what the errors have been, and they understand how they can do things differently, and they understand that if they get promoted, they can stop what's just happened happening again.
I think that's probably quite important from a fan's point of view, isn't it? It's the taking of responsibility for failure, even if it's not entirely theirs. As long as somebody says, we hold our hands up and no, we acknowledge that we got this badly wrong.
I mean, the club tried doing that at the end of the previous season, didn't they? When the statement went on the website saying, we're going to rebuild, this won't happen again.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it?
Radrizzani spent the summer doing interviews saying this isn't going to happen again, and then it was worse.
It did, and worse.
I was going to say, so they said that, and then you did the interview with Ornstein with Radrizzani, in which he says it's impossible.
Now, Moscow made a very good point about that, which is that if, in translation, perhaps he was meaning unthinkable rather than impossible, but the word was impossible. That was there in black and white. I think you can see some of the dysfunction at boardroom level in the kind of stream of communication, such as it was after they got relegated. That really short statement on the website that wasn't signed by anybody was pretty inadequate when it came to saying sorry for what had gone on. That initial statement from Radrizzani, which seemed to be saying, I might well stick around, guys, we've made a lot of mistakes, but we need to rectify them. And then very little until that holding statement between Asa Radrazani and the 49ers saying we have a deal in principle, or we have a deal to go through, and that has pretty much been it.
Did you spot that initially just came from, it had the Leeds badge and the 49ers Enterprises logo on it, and then it was an updated version went on sometime later with the Asa logo added? Yes,
and you won't have it won't have passed your attention.
Conversations were had?
Maybe. It won't have passed your attention either that the Radrazani statement did not show up on any of Leeds' official channels either, and as I said at the time, I don't think that was accidental.
So a man very much on the way out.
Well, he is, and trying to sort out his takeover of Sampdoria, which does look like by hook or by crook it is going to get there, even though it's an incredible mess and by no means straightforward. But, you know, you mentioned last time we spoke, or last time but one, about his reply to somebody on Twitter basically saying, I'm sorry it didn't work, and this, that and the other. That is a man who's gone now. You know, it's a man who's gone from the club.
Do you think he mentally checked out a while ago?
Well, he wasn't here for the final game of the season. The week leading up to the defeat to Spurs, he was in Italy trying to sort out the Sampdoria deal, and I totally understand that if you're selling one club to buy another, you've got to get your ducks in a row on all fronts. But I didn't think that was a good look, you know. And I mean, what purpose would it have served, I suppose, for him to have been in the director's box aside from, you know, a target for people to aim frustration at? But it's that whole thing about going down with the ship, really, isn't it? So that's probably a fair comment.
I think that was
bad choice of words, that, Phil, considering...
It is, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I think that was the contrast, wasn't it? He was on the pitch at Brentford, wasn't he, when we stayed up, and then not in the country when we went down. So I think there's a contrast there, isn't there?
Yes.
And the other thing is, like, while it feels very inert at the minute, as soon as this one is got over the line and they make an appointment and they make an announcement, and then, you know, we've seen Tyler Roberts leave, for example, which we can have a chat about if you fancy. The moves start to happen and suddenly it grinds into life again. The narrative all starts moving forward. Things are happening. You're then progressing towards the start of pre-season. So just because it's static now doesn't mean that it will be forever, even though it kind of feels that way.
I think everybody has to accept, whether they like it or not, that this summer is going to be a little bit like that. I mean, we're almost into July. We've got the fixture list now. Season starts first weekend of August. There's no feasible way in which Leeds can have the squad together and sorted out for the very first weekend of the season. They can have it well in place and they can have plenty done, but this has got to be a transfer window, surely, like previous ones, but even more so this one, that does run right up to the very end of it, because
6 weeks it is, Phil, till the first game. 6 weeks.
Yeah, so the idea that in 6 weeks everybody's gone, everybody's been signed, the squad is perfect and as you want it, is, you know, totally implausible. It very rarely happens anyway. That is highly unusual for clubs to get to the first weekend of the season and find that everything is in place. But yeah, this window, more than most, I think, is going to be pretty fraught and pretty frantic.
And with regards to Tyler Roberts, then, there was maybe a school of thought that said he might stay for the Championship, having been there before. But you're already kind of, for the benefit of anybody who's on the audio version, then you kind of was shaking your head there.
No, he was one. He was out on loan last season. He was one who I think was always going to go.
His race was run. Race was run.
Yeah, race was run. I don't know. I don't know how in time I'll reflect on Tyler Roberts. I think the thing that I'll think about most is how wedded Bielsa was to him right the way through, and clearly how much Bielsa thought of him as a footballer, but also somebody who could influence games that needed changed. I don't think it happened enough. I don't think Roberts had enough in the way of good performances to say that this move has been anything like a success for him. Had a lot of injuries too, which didn't help. But it's one of those that hasn't worked. And I think after the end of last season, it made a lot of sense to get him out of the way, because he'd become a bit of a lightning rod for things that were going wrong. And at this stage, if you're looking for a clean slate and a fresh start, I'm not really sure it does anybody good to be going back to a player who the crowd are already sceptical about.
I think ultimately when we look back on him, he was in the team for an awful lot of wins, wasn't he? So you'll generally have a memory of him that maybe as an individual...
Maybe you'll go, oh, Robert's playing that.
Was never the best player on the pitch, but, you know, he was there for a lot of good stuff, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And Bielsa clearly loved him.
And he had that goal at Hull, which was, I always said this, but, you know, the best goals under Bielsa generally were not like 25-yard top corner finishes. It was the construction of back to front, some of the counter-attacking for a side who dominated possession and always liked to have the ball. Counter-attacking was phenomenal. And that attack was just about as good as any. I think if you did a list of top 10 Bielsa goals, that makes it easy, that one. And I've seen people out there who say it's the best goal that was scored on his watch.
Do you know what I think we need now? And it's such a kind of a childish, almost consumerist approach to this.
No.
But like some shiny new toys. That's what we need as fans. We need something new to start getting behind. So when the manager comes in, we'll all hope for and start to think the best of them. We'll search out videos on YouTube of their teams playing a particular style of football and go, we can look forward to some of that. Maybe ignore some of the bad bits. But the same for players as well. So when that first signing comes in, maybe a new striker or whatever, you go, well, they've scored goals at this level. You know, we can look forward to this person banging a few in, and you just start to then mentally move forward, don't you? Whereas, like I said, we kind of feel like we're just kind of entrenched and stuck at the minute, just trying to clear the decks, as it were.
I think a bit of youth coming into the team at the start of next season will get people on side as well. If we start the year and like Cresswell's in the team and maybe JB and Gray are maybe not starting, but if they're getting minutes, I feel like stuff like that, if that's in a winning team and all that's going on in the background, it does just starts to bring back a bit of feel good, doesn't it? Because it's been horribly absent for a very long time.
I don't think the 49ers would disagree with you about shiny new toys. I think they can probably see that people need something else to invest in now and something else to get on board with, starting with a head coach and then players to come after that. It's just we're in one of those periods at the moment, aren't we, where you're waiting for it all to happen, and until it happens, you can't really start to get a proper handle of how it's going to look and what we're actually going to be dealing with when the season starts. There's time enough to go yet, but without a doubt, this summer is squeezed.
Is there any part of you that has seen the fixtures drop this morning and gone, I'm really looking forward to this coming season? Because that was the thing that actually took the wind out of my sails this morning. I went, oh, God. I've
seen a lot of people say that. Someone saying it's like the last 3 years never happened. Yeah. Like we've been asleep for 3 years and here we are back. I messaged you this morning and said it's kind of like the most championship fixture list ever, isn't it? Particularly the way it starts. I just, it's like first bunch of games: Cardiff, Birmingham, West Brom, Ipswich, Sheffield Wednesday, Millwall, Hull City, Watford. It's championship regulars.
Yeah, if you look down the list of championship clubs, and I don't know if this is something to do with the way that the financial controls have maybe levelled out a lot of the divisions, but the championship seems to be made up of clubs that are all basically just the same now. Somewhere between capacity of about 15 to 30,000, crowds in the same sort of ballpark.
Yeah.
Some have been there for a long time, some have been up, some have come down, but by and large, it's all clubs of that stripe.
But football's becoming a little bit like that, isn't it? In that nobody plays in a Ellen Road anymore. Everybody's got new grounds, new stadiums that are absolutely fit for purpose. In the championship, I mean, you are just talking about a tier of clubs where a lot of sides are much of a muchness, and actually there's something to be said for that. And I think that's what consistently makes the championship a really good competition, or very tight competition, is that I think that the thing you said to me this morning was there's nothing in there that strikes the fear of God into you. And I suspect there'll be quite a few clubs who would say the same of Leeds at the moment, given that Leeds have so much to do. But it is the one thing that I guess the thing that made the penny drop was looking through that. You think to yourself, if you did actually invest quite heavily in this league, and if you were ambitious and you kind of went for it, then it's all there for you, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
I think. Yeah,
it is there to be taken, isn't it? The fear, based on the last few years of action, is that it's Leeds United, and we don't trust them, sadly. And I know we've got the new broom and all that, but we've still not heard from the new broom.
Yeah, but the new broom's got to prove itself. I think people are so educated now about ownership, and also at Leeds have so much experience of ownership, that the last thing most people are going to do is just to blindly assume that this is going to be milk and honey and all great. But I think there is plenty to suggest that it could be good or very good under the 49ers. They do seem to have the sort of funding and the money that they need. The biggest question in my head is whether this summer, the way it is going to allow them to have the best go at it. I still think they can, but it's going to be hard work.
I mean, financially, this is the structure we were dreaming of for years in the Championship, wasn't it? Having owners with actual money who have already put money in to buy it, who need to get that money back, and parachute payments. For years, that's what we were desperate for. And
the joy of parachute payments.
But now we've got
I've dreamed of them for so long.
But now we've got it. It somehow feels not as good as it did. When other people had them, it felt better. for them.
Well, it's the reality of going up and then getting relegated again, isn't it? That's what kind of undermines the abstract idea of having this clout in the Championship. It's the fact that you've got to go up and then go down again to get it. And I think for me, part of the disappointment is probably mired in the idea that actually, I understand why Norwich have just gone up and down, and their fans have lowered their expectations and have become a yo-yo club, because I haven't enjoyed a lot of the Premier League. And maybe that's just because we're losing games and you enjoy winning games, and maybe it's as basic as that.
You've got to think with the size of club we are and have the potential to be, the aim surely is to be Newcastle or West Ham, though, as a team that bounces up and down a bit, but then gets there and gets investment and actually wins things and qualifies for Europe and, you know, does some of the fun stuff of the Premier League rather than just scraping by, avoiding relegation every season, which is essentially the aim of teams like Watford, Norwich, West Brom, people like that who've been up and down loads of times.
Yeah.
That was pretty much always their aim.
It's sort of human nature when you are losing games. I think you're totally right about this, and I'm the same as everybody else, to get a bit petty and a bit toys out the pram of this division's rubbish when actually it's you that's rubbish.
Yeah.
You know,
that's why we're here.
That's the problem. Yeah, that's the issue. And I think there are clubs in the Premier League who are showing that you can make a go of the division and have fun in it without actually having to be one of the main players and the big hitters. And to be quite frank, I think the sooner people forget the idea of being a main player in the Premier League, probably the better, because it's absolutely nothing to do with fan base anymore or history or any of that. It's all to do with how much money do you have, and some of the clubs in there have so much money it's just absolutely untrue, as may well be proven by City getting involved with Declan Rice and potentially beating Arsenal to him, and there again you just go, well, you know, all roads lead to the Etihad. Point of amusement this morning was somebody sending me a screen grab of Swansea and Plymouth back-to-back in the space of 5 days in February, and the WhatsApp said in its entirety, think of the mileage.
Is it still 45p?
Something like that, yeah.
You don't like seeing your kids anyway, do you?
No, not at a weekend.
Nice to get away for a few days.
We were talking on our show, it was Valentine's Day as well. Not that I don't imagine either of you being particular. I mean, Michael, I know you're not going to do, but indulging in that sort of romantic nonsense, are you?
Do you pass on freebies that come here by way of astonished cleaning products and so on?
My wife will be getting a Squareball beach towel for Valentine's this year. It's perfect for February in Pontefract.
If you were being cruel, then the architect of our downfall, boo hiss, Victor Orta, he's got this new gig. Can you give us some of your perspective on this? We spoke about it on the weekly show yesterday, so we've kind of done our bit on it. But what's your take on it? Has he failed upwards? It's
a good job. It's a really good job. I'm not at all surprised that they were keen to take him back, because he had a good reputation at Sevilla. He'd developed and grown up under Monkey there, who has obviously gone to Aston Villa and left that vacancy. So he's a known quantity, and I think Sevilla certainly think more highly of him than people in Leeds do at the moment. I don't mean the club. I think people within the club always had a good amount of time for Orta, but clearly his reputation around here has been badly damaged by the way the last 2 seasons have gone, and particularly relegation. If he's failing upwards, the only thing I would say is that that's hardly unique in football, is it? You see a lot of players who don't do well at clubs who land on pretty decent transfers. You see a lot of managers who don't do particularly well land in other jobs.
The Athletics' Phil Hay talking here, by the way.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all the case of who rings your phone and when. So no stones getting thrown by me. But yeah, I wouldn't be that surprised if it doesn't go quite well for him at Sevilla. Actually, it's a different level in that they're mixed in European competition, and also it seems to me, and I might be wrong here, but it seems to me that the risk of relegation in La Liga for a club like Sevilla is not like it is for a club like Leeds in the Premier League. As we said time and time again last season, there were points where it felt like about 12 clubs could go down in the Premier League and could go down quite easily. Just isn't really like that elsewhere.
Does he want Junior Firpo?
Well, he was asked about Rodrigo, wasn't he? And kind of batted that one off, saying it was just rumours. They actually, from what I read, they've signed a left back already, I think. So
you can never have too many, though.
You can never have too many Junior Firpos.
No, okay.
So I'm gonna suggest no to that one.
Yeah. Oh well. Poor Junior.
But they need somebody to take Philpo.
Just want to qualify this by saying he seems like a nice bloke.
Yeah.
But maybe he's just not the right fit for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a lot of players at Leeds who are, decent blokes. But you
this is damned by faint praise. He's a decent bloke.
Well, no, I mean, like, I think the idea that there were people at Leeds who weren't bothered as they went down, or en masse, the squad doesn't care, is dead easy to level at people when it's all going wrong. It'll really hurt some of them in particular. I think people like Cooper, Ayling, others who were involved in getting them promoted in the first place, it will really, really sting. But in the end, as a footballer, you get judged on how you play.
This is reminding me a bit about the time Bielsa was asked in an early press conference about Idaguchi, and he said something like he had great respect for the Japanese people. And it was like very much a... no, he won't be staying, was the answer.
I've got to say, high praise for Robin Koch's agent as well, who's putting in the mileage this summer. Lots of rumours out there.
There is some German interest in Robin Koch. I remain to be convinced that he's going to Man United, have to be honest, but I do think he will go.
Yeah, and not for free. Maybe on loan, as we were saying the other week.
There are circumstances in which he could go on loan, because if that is the only offer he's willing to take, or if that's the only offer Leeds think is worth accepting because somebody's going to pay all his wages.
Well, the suggestion was that relegation meant we were obligated to take a loan for him.
I cannot work out if that's the case, and I'm still not convinced that it is, but I might be wrong. But the chatter about he can go for free just doesn't seem right to me. From what I've been told, I just don't think he can leave on a free transfer this summer. Yes, he's out of contract in 12 months' time. So if he goes on loan, then he becomes a free agent further down the line. So if you take him on loan for a season and then sign him, technically you'd be signing him on a free. But that's not the same. That's like common sense.
Well, what I would say is if he goes on loan and then breaks his leg while he's on that loan, he's not getting signed for free then at the end of it, is he?
Well, no, possibly not. No, so, that's the risk you would take. But I think the point I'm making is that it's common sense that if he goes on loan and then reaches the end of his contract, he's a free agent. But that's not the same as a clause saying he can go on a free transfer this summer.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, yeah, absolutely. I know Victor Orta's done some questionable things at the time, decisions I wouldn't agree with in his time as sporting director at Leeds, whatever it was, his job title. But that doesn't strike me as that was the sort of thing we'd do.
No, but at the same time, I don't think you should rule out Koch going on loan, depending on what comes in for him. He's on a big wage. They're going to have to get rid of him this summer. He's going to have to move on. But it doesn't seem to me that it's quite as it's been portrayed, which is that he can go for free. A bit more complex than that. I'm
struggling to think of many that I want to keep. I know we've spoken about this before, but
who do you want to keep?
I'd like to keep Nonto, make him earn his stripes. Actually, I'll ask you about this. Have you heard anything about him being a bit mischievous with his disciplinary stuff behind the scenes? Because it's a rumour that I've heard a few times.
If not to any great extent. I don't think there were any huge problems with his discipline, especially. And I don't think you can pin that to his form towards the end of the season, although he was badly out of form. But he's somebody they really like, and if you want to keep him, 49ers would really like to keep him as well. Likewise, Tyler Adams, I always say that. I don't know. A little bit like Jack Harrison, it feels as if there might well be too much interest there for them to resist. But I suppose, again, it depends on the conversations that the 49ers are able to have once the deal gets approved, once they're able to sit down with people properly and discuss this over. And I suppose if they can sell them an image that they like, then who's to say?
Yeah, that's the problem. The players you want to keep are the ones who are most likely to leave. I think the realistic ones, well, semi-realistic ones to keep would be people like Max Verber. I think would be a very solid championship defender. And
yeah, I agree.
I like to think we'd be able to maybe keep Cody Drama. I don't know what the plan on that is, but he's obviously proved himself twice now in the championship. We don't have a good right back from what we've seen in the last year, so it feels like it'd be sensible to give him a go there as well. So it's quite a low bar, I admit. Trying to keep someone who was on loan at Luton last year as my main aim, but it feels like these are players who are here and I think could do a job for us.
But does that come from a place of thinking we can't get rid of everybody? Because that's how I feel about it. Like somebody's got to surely stay.
You've got to keep some players. Yeah, certain players have got to stay in the mix. With Dramé, they'll have to convince him that he's going to play. That will be the main thing for him. Will be to know that he is going to be in the team and he is going to get a game. And I know you were saying clinging to a player who was at Luton last season, but he was very good, Dramé, and Luton were very good as well, as proven by the way the season finished. So yeah, I agree with you about Verber. I think he's exactly the sort of person that you could kind of start to build a defence around. The midfield certainly worries me in the sense that we'd expect Roca to go. I think it'll be a real battle to keep. Yeah,
I hit the bell then when I shrugged.
Well, it's quite nice timing that. Yeah, fitted in,
theatrical
for whom the bell tolls. Yes, no, I get you shrugging your shoulders, but what I mean is, Roca goes, if they can't keep hold of Adams. Decision to make about Forshaw, but clearly injuries are a big problem for him again this season. There's not a right lot there, is there? JB, you would hope would start to come through now. He's looked really good in the academy, but that's an area where yet again they're going to have to recruit pretty heavily. So no, I agree with you that they can't lose everybody, but some of them will be really difficult to hold on to.
Who do we keep then? Dan James, maybe.
I can see that.
Yeah, I think he'd be a real asset at this level, assuming he's prepared to stay. I know he's going to be on a big whack, but you know.
I think there's a good chance that'll happen. Yeah.
Such is life. Who else?
I dare say Bamford will stay, unless I guess a newly promoted team gets to the point where they're a week before the season and think, they'd probably loan him to get the wages off. But I feel like a bit like I guess. Roberts has left. I feel like it probably wouldn't do Bamford any harm to have a move this summer. But I just don't know who would take him.
I feel the same, but I'm in two minds about that one. I can see a scenario in which he sticks around, can see a scenario in which he goes. Ruta was one who was said to me right back after the season finished, he'll most likely stick around, or Leeds will try to keep him. I know he was linked with going back to Hoffenheim again, and we'll see with him, because, he was very, very expensive signing. And presumably, despite everything that's gone on, thinks of himself as having a future at a higher level than this. People like Sinisterra, I think there'll be enough interest in Sinisterra despite his injuries for him to go. Again, if you could keep him in the Championship, he'd be absolutely fantastic. But it does feel like a level below where he should really be playing at. So there's a lot to do. And as I've said previously with the Academy, this is surely where all that Academy investment has to start paying off to some extent.
Yeah, if it doesn't happen in the Championship, then where is it going to happen?
And if it does, maybe Victor Ultra will come back and he can start carrying on in the West Stand again.
How do you think that'd be received?
Shouting at people about Mateo Joseph. Said, I told you it'd be good.
But that's the thing, is planning for a future that never arrives, is that it's all fine and well having these players for 3 or 4 years down the line. But if you torch the immediate here and now in the process, and there's no place for them, is there? You're just having to start again. And that's where we find ourselves.
Yeah. I would definitely be involving Charlie Creswell in this after his season at Millwall, and it still strikes me as kind of odd how willing and open Leeds were to bids for him back in January, given that he's so young and he does seem to have plenty about him. Joseph scored a lot of goals for the 21s. Perkins has looked good at that level too. There is a big leap, definite leap, but it's a smaller leap to Championship level than it is to the Premier League. And given their age and everything else, there's absolutely no point in them being here if they're not going to be able to contribute at this level, because Leeds don't see themselves as falling any lower than this level. And I know, famous last words. Yeah. Yes, as you say, it's slightly different to 2004.
What month do you reckon we'll be safe by?
I'm going to stick my neck out and say December. But they're not old, these guys at all, Perkins and JB and so on. But 2, 3, 4 years' time, they'll be kind of early 20s, pushing on towards mid 20s, and that's when they should be starting to edge towards their peak. So if these have been good signings and if this recruitment has been worthwhile, then we're going to find out, aren't we?
And where are my grizzled Championship bastards that I requested the other week? I want some of those.
Yeah.
Can we have some of those? Maybe not grizzled, just good Championship bastards.
No point in asking me, really, is there?
No.
Yeah. You probably can. You might just have to wait.
Hand on heart, honestly, how much do you know about the Championship since we've gone up? Have you completely shut it off? I
actually did unfollow the EFL on Twitter. Yeah, which was rash.
Yeah, I'm still following the Premier League, but I know I need to undo that.
I think I will probably unfollow them at some point as well. I don't need to see Jack Grealish's top corner finishes on a Monday morning, particularly. I must confess, I haven't kept across the Championship massively over the past 3 seasons.
Scoffed it being on late at night on ITV and gone, we're on match of the day now.
I took more interest in it last season, actually, because you had Creswell at Millwall and you had Gelhardt, who was out in Drammy as well, and a lot of these clubs were in contention at the top end of the division, so there was interest there. And actually, you know, getting down to the point where the playoff final was Coventry and Luton was a good story in itself.
That made me feel sad though as well.
Why so?
Because I'm an arrogant Leeds fan.
Oh, okay.
And I thought we're going to be replaced by one of those two.
Yeah. But in some ways, it hasn't changed much, the Championship, as it is. Massively even. But as Burnley showed, if you do get it together and you do have a proper plan and you stick a bit of money into it, you can get out of it in quite good fashion.
So once again, we land back on the point of just get it done, Leeds.
Yes, yes. It's going to be a long summer, this, isn't it? It was always going to be a really long summer, even though it's a really short summer.
Yeah, I was going to say, even though it's 6 weeks until the first game, that's going to come round quickly.
Yeah.
It'll be here before we know it.
I mean, if you think back to the summer of 21 when they did Firpo and they did Dan James, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think, with the possible exception of Chris Claassen, I don't think they did anything else, did they? I think it was those 2 deals.
I've just blocked it all out now.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And so going into that summer, there was never going to be a change of ownership. There was never going to be a change of head coach as long as they got a contract together with Bielsa, but that always seemed to happen. There was going to be a minimal amount of recruitment. There wasn't going to be much going out either. And okay, it did not work. And with hindsight, they would have that summer over again. But that's sort of summer where it ticks by because people aren't really looking for that much to happen. Whereas this summer, you're kind of expecting it all day, every day, aren't you?
Yes. Well, 6 weeks to go, and we'll be on telly for the first one as well. That's been confirmed.
Yes.
First fixture moves for Sky. Cardiff is 2:30 on the Sunday. I hated the Premier League 2 o'clock Sunday kickoffs. I always felt like it just...
Well, in that case, it's
2:30. It's
like
just that lovely
home,
sweet spot.
Well, no, it's,
it's perfect.
It does give you that extra half hour in bed, doesn't it? But no, I mean, from the perspective of it actually just flattens the atmosphere. Like your Saturday games always have a little bit more about them because people are more prone to going out, a few drinks beforehand. Sunday, you've got one eye on Monday, haven't you? And it's not quite as raucous. It never was.
Yeah, I don't like Saturday 12 o'clocks. It feel, or really early kickoffs, because it feels like you're done before you've properly got yourself going. I always like the 5:30 games, particularly Ellen Road.
Yeah, that's probably booze related as well.
Might well be, yeah.
The good ones. But that said, it might be all right. August sunshine and all that. Sunday afternoon, and we start off gloriously like we did against Stoke last time we were here, and everything goes well, and we get promoted, and barely lose a game. I am genuinely quite optimistic and looking forward to this new season. But in the abstract, I'm looking forward to it because it's 6 weeks away. I still need to see what happens over the next 6 weeks.
A great way of putting it. I feel exactly the same. I'm sort of quietly optimistic. I'm not totally sure why, because you need to see a lot of stuff happen before you can actually put down on paper your reasons for that. But I kind of feel like it's got the potential to go well, this.
And there we go. Let's clip that bit. Phil Hayes saying those words and throw it back in your face in 12 months' time when we start our League One campaign. Right, on which note, let's end it there. We will catch up on Monday then, and hopefully we do have something to report by then.
Yes, fingers crossed.
We'll see you soon.
The Square Ball Podcast.